At the beginning of the film, we see a group of scientists conducting an experiment. Under Frank's supervision, they adjust the dosage of a substance being injected into a pig. However, to the protagonist's displeasure, the experiment does not yield the desired result. The scene shifts to St. Patterson's University in Berkeley, California. A woman named Zoe enters the building. Accompanying her to the elevator is a young woman named Eva. Zoe explains to Eva that their project is funded by a major company, and therefore she will need to sign a non-disclosure agreement to join the team. Eva signs the necessary papers and becomes the operator responsible for filming the scientists' experiments. Frank sits in front of the camera with Zoe and begins explaining his work. Frank reveals that he and Zoe have developed the Lazarus Serum. Using a special needle, the serum is injected into the temporal lobe of the brain, and then by flipping a switch, electricity is used to trigger certain impulses in the brain. The Lazarus Serum can not only cure severe diseases, but also bring humans or animals back to life. While Eva reviews the recorded material, two other scientists, Nico and Clay, are playing a board game. They are impressed by their new operator and try to win her attention. Frank jokingly says he also likes Eva, hoping to make Zoe jealous. Laughing, Zoe replies that she will fire Frank for such thoughts. Evening falls, Zoe stays alone in the office, turns on music, and begins working on the serum. Soon the music fades, and Nico playfully scares the woman. He offers her sushi and asks about her relationship with Frank. Zoe explains that before they received the grant, she and Frank had planned to get married but postponed the wedding. Now 3 years later, Frank has become so absorbed in his work that he seems to have forgotten about family altogether. Shortly after, Zoe finishes her work and goes home. That night, she has a nightmare in which strange hallways are filled with smoke, and behind a door, people are burning. Zoe moves to the living room, sits in a chair, and presses a cross to her lips. Frank tries to comfort the woman, telling her he'll wait for her in bed. The next morning, Zoe arrives at the office and discusses a problem with her colleagues. She's somewhat irritated by Clay's behavior, but in the end, it is he who comes up with a solution. Soon, Frank's team begins a new experiment, this time using an euthanized dog. Before administering the serum, Zoe notices that the dog has cataracts in both eyes. Then the woman approaches the switch. She removes her ring and pendant for safety and switches on the current. However, neither the first nor the second attempt yields any results. Nico sits beside the dog and decides to examine it, when suddenly the animal comes back to life. Zoe is astonished. After some time, the dog cataracts completely disappear. Frank decides to take the dog home for the time being. He also instructs the team not to discuss what happened until they're sure the experiment was a success. Frank and the other scientists then celebrate their success in the lab. At home, Zoe tries to feed the dog, whom the man named Rocky, but notices that it is not hungry. Zoe observes that the dog behaves somewhat strangely. She discusses with Frank whether they might have pulled Rocky out of some sort of dog heaven. As a believer, Zoe is deeply concerned about such questions. Frank reassures her, saying that once the experiments are complete, the serum will only be used to help those who desire it. That night, Zoe sleeps peacefully in her bed. The woman does not hear the dog open the door to her room. Rocky climbs onto the bed and stares intently at her. The next day in the lab, Eva tries to play with the dog, but it does not respond to her attempts. A debate arises between Zoe and Frank about what happens after death. Frank believes that the light at the end of the tunnel and other similar visions are merely hallucinations caused by a shutting down brain. Zoe disagrees, arguing that humans have a soul, a concentrated form of energy, and the substance released at death helps this energy transition from one form to another. Frank also clarifies that this very substance served as the basis for the serum. Soon, Rocky is sent for examination. It turns out that the serum has not yet left the animal's body. Clay reports that it contains substances that may cause heightened aggression. The dog is locked in a small cage, and it is decided not to feed him. Clay starts playing a computer game, but suddenly hears a loud crash. He looks into the kitchen and sees food spilled from the fridge, but Rocky is nowhere to be found. Clay searches for the dog, who now looks very aggressive. Frank records the interim results of the experiment on a voice recorder. The scientist discovers that, in addition to increased aggression and lack of appetite, Rocky is experiencing confusion, and new neural connections have started forming in his brain. The next day, Frank is summoned by his superiors. They inform him that all his experiments exceed the scope of the contract and must therefore be terminated. Additionally, the companies sponsoring Frank's projects have been absorbed by a larger corporation, which now owns all the scientists' research. While everything is being confiscated from the lab basement, Eva manages to sneak Rocky away. The scientists gather at Frank's house. Frank believes that no one will now believe they were the ones who invented the serum. He decides to repeat the experiment and record everything on camera. By releasing the footage, he hopes to ensure that he and his team are recognized as the creators of the Lazarus serum. Zoe reveals that she managed to hide part of the created material, and Eva, in addition to saving the dog, also retrieved a key card that will allow access to the lab. At night, Frank and the rest of the team infiltrate their workplace. Everyone takes their positions. Zoe approaches the switch and flips it. Suddenly, the lights go out, and she collapses, fatally electrocuted. Frank realizes that she forgot to remove the ring he had given her during their engagement. That's exactly what caused her death. Unable to bear losing his beloved so abruptly, Frank places her on a couch and prepares to administer the serum. The others try to dissuade him, pointing out that experiments on humans are strictly forbidden. Gradually, however, they all agree to help Frank. Neither the first nor the second attempt yields the desired results. The experiment is also interrupted by the appearance of a security guard. After the man leaves, Frank turns around and is stunned. Zoe is sitting on the couch, resurrected. Frank tries to talk to her but realizes she is in severe shock. Gradually, Zoe regains her senses, though her responses are slightly delayed. Frank decides to conduct some tests on her. Clay notices that Zoe's neural activity is off the charts. He also points out that this is due to the serum, which for some reason is not being absorbed. Frank explains to Eva that humans use different parts of their brains, but only about 10% at a time. In Zoe's case, her entire brain is showing signs of activity. Frank takes Zoe into another room to talk. Zoe says she feels a little strange and then suddenly utters something Frank himself was about to say. However, the woman immediately forgets what happened. Left alone, Zoe realizes she can move objects with her thoughts. Additionally, she hears Frank discussing her condition with his colleagues through closed doors. Zoe decides to wash her hands and notices that her fingers still hold a residual charge. Her fingers, along with a scar from the injection on her head, have turned black. Zoe decides to touch a mirror, which causes it to crack. Looking at her reflection, she sees that one side of her face is smiling. Zoe runs to Frank, feeling nauseous, and tells him that something is wrong with her. She describes hearing voices, the blackness on her fingers, and other strange things. Zoe also reveals that after her death, she found herself in a strange place, a burning corridor just like the one from her nightmares. Frank reassures her, saying it was just memories of childhood trauma. However, Zoe doesn't believe him. She's convinced she went to hell. Frank calms Zoe again and gives her medication to help her sleep. Eva approaches the sleeping Zoe and suddenly finds herself in the same burning corridor. Something grabs Eva by the arm, leaving a burn mark. After learning about the incident, Frank explains that when Zoe was a child, a fire broke out in her home, and the neighbors couldn't escape. Since then, Zoe has had recurring nightmares about it. Frank cannot explain the mark on Eva's hand, or how she saw his beloved past. Clay tries to reassure Eva, suggesting that the serum unlocked abilities in Zoe's brain, such as telepathy and much more. An evolution that would normally take about 2 million years occurred in Zoe's brain within minutes, due to the serum. Frank discovers that data from their experiments has been copied to external computers. He asks the scientists to locate the dog and prepare to flee the lab. Meanwhile, Zoe tears off her cross pendant and wakes up. Nico notices Zoe's absence and goes to search for her. Zoe finds him and confesses that she made a mistake as a child and spent her entire life trying to fix it. The woman is angry that despite her efforts, she still ended up in hell. Zoe tries to kiss Nico, but he pulls away. Using telekinesis, the woman locks him in a cabinet and then crushes him. Zoe returns to the bed, pretending to know something. Clay feels that Zoe is responsible for Nico's disappearance and shouts at her. Using telekinesis, Zoe kills Clay with his own steam-generated device. Frank and Eva retrieve the device from Clay's throat. Frank looks at Zoe in horror, but at that moment, the lights go out again. Eva panics, feeling that something other than Zoe has returned to this world. Frank also feels that Zoe now poses a threat to the world. He fills a syringe with a solution that could end her life. However, Zoe wins the fight. Eva prepares 2 syringes as well. Zoe sends Eva back into her past. Eva sees young Zoe holding matches and realizes it is she who started the fire. Eva manages to return to reality and injects Zoe with the solution, causing her to die. A rescuer approaches Eva, but it turns out to be Zoe, who breaks Eva's neck. Zoe then injects the man with the serum. Soon Frank comes back to life. At this point, the movie ends. Thank you all for watching the video until the end. Please like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts on the movie, and we'll see you in the next video.